Thank you guys for joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about Google Forms and all the things that you can do with Google Forms. When people think of Google Forms, they immediately think of just collecting surveys, collecting data, which it can do. But we're going to talk about those things. We're going to talk about some other things and different ways that we can use it.
So before we begin, just wanted to go over some housekeeping for the webinar. We've all found the chat button. That's where we were introducing ourselves. If you have a question that comes up, if you could please hit the Q&A section and type your question in there. And when the Q&A comes up, we will get to all of those questions. If there is something that's not too important and you don't mind other people within our webinar answering it, you can go ahead and you can type it in the chat.
So just quickly going to run through the agenda today. We're going to talk about what is Google Forms, go through some of the basic navigations and controls, how and why you would want to create sections within your Google form, go through some of the settings, how we can integrate it or how it is integrated with Google Sheets, and then more forms than just assessments. So more things that we can do with Google Forms instead of just using it as an assessment tool.
So when we look at Google Forms overall, it started out as just a survey tool. And then it morphed itself into the ability for us teachers to use it to give quizzes. The ability to have a quiz or an assessment wasn't there in the beginning, and then now it's morphed itself again into something even more fantastic. I've seen people use this for a student registration, a sign-up sheet for different office hours. We can still use it for online quizzes because it does grade itself, but now there's even more possibilities with it with Breakout EDUs, also known as like escape rooms, and more. So we're going to get into all of this today.
So how to open up and how to create a Google form. So there's a few ways that you can do this. So you can, one, just open up a new tab and you can type in forms.new and it's going to automatically open up a new form for you. You can go to your Google Drive, click new, go down to more, and then underneath more is the Google Forms section. And then you can also just go to your waffle and choose Google Forms. So those are three ways that you can go through and create a Google form.
So when we look at a brand new Google form, this is what it looks like. When you open it up, this is everything that you see. We're going to go through this page and we're going to identify what all of these buttons are, what you see, what they all do. So the very first thing that you see is where it says Untitled Form. That's the title. Once you put in the title, you want to make it identifying for yourself. And then you'll see where it says Untitled Question. That's where you would literally type out the question stem. And then next to that are the different question types that you can choose from. So this question type would be a multiple choice. And then you'll have answer choices. So where it says option 1, that would be one answer choice. So that would be like answer A. And if you want to add subsequent answer choices beneath that, like A, B, C, D, E, you would just hit enter or hit add option below where it says option 1, and you would keep writing in all your answer choices. You also have the option of, instead of writing something out, you can put in a picture. So the students can answer the question by picking a picture instead of words. Another option you have, let's say that you finish this question, you can actually copy this question. So if you have almost the same question stem or still 4 answer choices, just a way to make things go a little faster for yourself when you're just typing your questions out, or even if you're copying and pasting from a Microsoft Word document, copying a question, especially if it's all multiple choice, really helps speed up the process when making any type of assessment or Breakout EDU. Then next to the copy question is a delete question. Let's say that I just want this question completely gone. I hit the trash can and it deletes it. Right next to that is a required button. What that means is when that button is actually slid over to the side, that means that the student has to answer that question. If that question is not required, the student doesn't have to technically answer it at all. An answer has to be given. And then next to that, there's 3 little dots. Those are more options. So when you click that, it'll open up another window that'll have a few more options, and we're going to get into that in a little bit later. Then you'll see this running menu that always shows up on the right-hand side. We're going to get into it a little later, but You can add a question, you can import question from other Google Forms, you can add titles, pictures, video, and then also sections. And we're going to show you what these actually look like within the Google Form themselves. At the very, very top, if you wanted to share this via link, you would just hit the send button. But most of the time, when you're going to be giving this to your students, you're just going to upload this document straight into Google Classroom, so you won't ever need to hit the send button. But let's say that you're making something for your PLC or your school, just your teachers in general. If you're in leadership and you just want to take a survey of what your teachers want, then you can send it via link. Right next to that is that little settings cog, so the flower. When you click that, it'll open up a bunch of settings, and we're going to get into what all three of those different setting pages look like, what they're for, and what they do. The eyeball is the most important. This is the student view feature. So if you want to see what you're creating and what it looks like from the student perspective, you can always scroll up and click on the student view button, and it'll actually open up the student view in another tab. So you can actually toggle back and forth between your tab of your teacher view where you're editing, and then the student view with what the students see. Then next to that one, that little paint palette, that's the customize button. So if you wanted to make things pretty, change the color format. If you wanted to add custom pictures as a little banner, that's where you can do it here in the customize. And then the puzzle piece are add-ons. So maybe there's a few add-ons that you want to use. Once they're approved, then you can add them straight here. And then the question and responses tab, these are at the very top. So right now we're on the questions. So this is where I would add all of the questions, and the responses are right next to it. So once the students actually take this Google form, assessment, quiz, survey, whatever it is that you're making, the responses would show up under the response tab.
Okay, so we kind of hit on this before, but what does required mean? So required means that it is a question that a student has to answer, or somebody has to answer. They can't skip it, they can't turn in their form, they can't submit it until that question is answered. So for example, the top one is our teacher view. So what is your first name? This is the question that we typed in. We made it a short answer, text answer, and then we marked it as required. So if the student were to go through, complete this form, and say, I don't want to put my name, and try to click submit, this is what they would see. A red box would show up around that question, and it would say, this is a required question. So it's going to force them to answer the question before they submit. So depending on what type of quiz you're getting, what type of assessment you're getting, you can make questions required where they have to answer them, or you can have that unchecked where they would be able to essentially skip that question and not have to answer it to submit their form.
And then so this is just a picture of a completed form, just the top view. You can see the title, you can see the question, and then you can also see under the responses tab that I had 187 responses. So all of my responses would show there. So when I click the responses tab, then I would be able to see a summary of all the responses, and I could scroll down and I could see what my students did overall per question, or I could look at their individual responses as well.
So when you're in your settings, after you click your settings cog or the flower, here's some of the general settings that you would see. So you can collect email addresses. You can require sign-in. So you can require users to have to sign into their TUSD Google accounts to access the form. You can limit the number of responses. So if you're giving a quiz and you only want them to be able to take it one time, you can click it where the only amount of times that they can take it is one time. They can only turn in one response. You can let them edit their answers after they've submitted, or you can let them see a summary chart and text responses of their responses. And then looking at the presentation, so what they see when they are on it. So you can show a progress bar. So sometimes we've taken forms online where at the bottom it'll show, 10% through 20%, 50%. So you can have that. So it lets them know like how far along they are in their quiz. You can shuffle the question order. So my number one question might not be Satara's number one question. You can show a link to submit another response. So if you're allowing them to submit multiple responses, once they submit their response, they will get a little link that says, click here to submit another response. And then you can customize the confirmation page. So by default, it just says something like, thank you for taking this form, but you can go through and you can add a custom response. So you can, put your own little message in there. If you wanted to add links to something in there, you can do that as well. And then looking at the quizzes section. So if you were creating a Google form that you wanted it to be a quiz, when you go to the quizzes section, you're going to click make this a quiz. And then you can turn on locked mode on Chromebooks, which means that they're not allowed to open tabs or other applications while they're taking this quiz. If they do, then you as the teacher get a response saying so-and-so opened another tab or they exited the form. So this student exited the form even though I turned on locked mode. You can also go in and you can decide when you want the grades on the form to be released to the students. Do you want them to be released immediately? So after they submit, they immediately get their answers, or you can make it later where you wait and you manually release those grades to the students. And then when they get those grades, you can decide what you want them to see. Do you want them to see the questions that they missed? Do you want them to see the correct answers? And then do you want them to see the points value? So depending on when you're giving this quiz and how you want them to kind of see their responses, it's gonna depend on which boxes you want checked. If you're giving a quiz, like especially for us elementary teachers, we can probably have all these checked and it's no big deal because we're just working with the same kids all day. But if you're a secondary teacher and I'm giving the same quiz, I'm teaching the same subject, periods 1, 2, 3, and 4, I probably don't want correct answer marked because then when my when my period 1 class takes it, they'll know what the correct answers are, and then they can go tell period 2, period 3, hey, these are the answers to these questions because I got them wrong. So just depending on how your class runs, how it's set up, you're going to mark certain features on the quizzes section.
So now we're going to get into those question types. So when you want to change a question type, you'll see that when you add a question, the default question type that's going to come up is multiple choice. There's a down caret next to that, and that will open up a big menu of question types. So there's short answer, paragraph, multiple choice, checkbox, drop down, file upload, linear scale, multiple choice grid, checkbox grid, date, and time. We have examples of each of these that are coming up to kind of show you what they look like from the teacher perspective and then also from the student.
So first ones here we're going to talk about are multiple choice, checkbox, and drop down. So multiple choice, only one correct answer. So this would be an example here. What class period are you in? Are you in period 1, period 2, period 3? Checkbox would be would allow students to select more than one answer, so kind of mimicking that SBAC of multiple responses. So which statement is true about gravity? Select as many choices as apply. So then they can go through and they can mark more than one correct answer. And then the drop down, so the students would see a drop down menu to select an answer. So this one they would click that drop down, and then they would get the two. In this case, like the two vocabulary words that they can use are the two words that they're supposed to put in that sentence. So they can see the drop-down menu, choose which one that they want to choose.
And then we're going to go over short answer, paragraph, file upload. So the short answer is students would write a short answer, usually a few words. Anything longer than a few words, we want to make it a paragraph. Short answer is really nice because the Google form, if you're just having them write one word, the Google form will actually grade it for you. So at the top, you'll see that, so under short answer, there's a teacher example and then what it looks like for the student. So for the teacher side, you'll see that there's a question and then there's a line. So it says, fill in the blank below with one word that completes the sentence. The blank is where all the energy on our planet comes from. And then on the student side, there's a box under that sentence where they would actually type in their answer. Since the answer is just one word, sun, you could put that. But let's say that they put the sun. You could also put different forms of the answer that the Google form will select and the Google form will accept and grade for you. So there's a way that you can make the Google form kind of work for you. That way you don't have to go back through and grade the short answers yourself. And then there's the paragraph. So you can actually allow your students to write one or multiple sentences as long as you choose the paragraph option. And so it'll let your students have a long answer. And so for the teacher view, that's the picture on the top. It says write down one sentence explaining how you feel. Well, you say one sentence, but you're going to have a student that's going to write down 5 to 10 sentences explaining how they feel and what they're going through. And then you'll see below where it says your answer, that's what the students see. So that's where they would click and they would just start typing away. Then another thing that's really awesome that Google Forms allows is it allows the students to upload files. So and we're gonna see this picture in a subsequent slide later on where you'll see it a lot bigger. But as a teacher, you get to select, well, what files do I want my students to upload? Do I just want an image file, a drawing, a presentation, a document? You can actually limit what they turn in, and you can limit the number of files and the size that you allow to get turned in. So there's a lot of choice with what you want the students to turn in within Google Forms.
And then just to hit on a couple things that we've already kind of talked about. So looking at the student responses at the bottom. So if you look and you see that there's that little red star next to a question, that's indicating to them that that is a required question. So if a student sees a question that has that little red star, it's telling them, okay, this is a required question. I have to answer it. And then just to kind of give you an example, I know we're talking about student stuff right now, but I know one of my friends who was working at a site and she was running the yearbook for her school. She used Google Form and she chose file upload as a response. So everyone who was like sending her pictures and stuff for the yearbook, she just used Google Form and collected it that way. So I know we're talking about using it with students, but that's a way that we can use it outside of just with our students. And then, so we're going to go through and talk about uploading the attachment. So the file upload option. So students can upload attachments to Google Forms like we talked about. So for question types, they would choose, you would choose file upload. And then like we talked about, we can specify what type of documents or what type of attachments we want them to allow to be able to be uploaded. So do we want them to upload just pictures? Do we want them to upload documents and spreadsheets or presentations? It just kind of depends on what that question is asking and what we're wanting to receive from our students. And then, like Satara said, you can maximize the number of files. So if you only want them to turn in one thing, you would just mark that as one, but maybe you want them to show multiple ways of their understanding. So maybe you're like, hey, I want you to do this assignment and I want you to show me 3 different ways that you understand the concept. So maybe they're going to turn in a written document, they're going to turn in an image that they've created, and they're going to turn in a presentation. So then you can say number of files is going to be 3 because you're asking for 3 ways of them showing how that they understand a particular concept.
And then I just wanted to add on, this is a great alternative to some things in Google Classroom. So especially what I've heard like from some teachers, especially at the secondary level, is my students are still turning in the work in Google Classroom and there's no way to stop accepting it. They had a hard deadline for something and it passed and students are still turning things in late. And yes, you can turn off the notifications, but they still think that, well, it's turned in, so why aren't I getting a grade? Or it's turned in, how come it's not there when everyone was presenting or it didn't show up on the slides? Google Forms is great because you can actually turn on and off accepting or not accepting responses. So if you have your students turning in any type of file, you can say, okay, this is a hard deadline because the form is going to stop accepting responses at this specific time. And that is something that can happen. So Google Forms is a great alternative if that's something that you're doing. So going back to the yearbook example, all of the pictures need to be in by this specific date, and the Google form can no longer accept the responses after that because after that you need time to upload all those pictures and to edit them and to go through the processing and then to send the yearbook to the printer. So there's a lot of things that Google Forms can do, and that yearbook example is a perfect one.
And then just to kind of get into some more answer choices here. So we're going to talk about linear scale, multiple choice grid, and a checkbox grid. So at the top is our view as teachers when we're creating it. The bottom is what the students are going to see. So you can, for example, create a linear scale. So, for this question, it's like you would mark it on a scale of 1 to 4. So this is what we would see on the top. And then as the students, they would see that at the bottom. So they would choose 1, 2, 3, or 4. When we're looking at a multiple choice grid, when we are creating it, we're going to see 2 columns. We're going to see column for rows, which I know is kind of confusing. And then we're going to see the column for columns. And then we can go through and we can mark what those labels are going to be. And then as the student, they can go down and they can see, okay, for this example, if I'm digging, which tool do I want to use? If I'm going to be breaking rocks, which tool am I going to use? So they can kind of answer multiple questions and choose different responses within that question. And then same thing kind of goes for the checkbox grid. You're going to create your rows and columns, and then they can, this way they can mark multiple responses. So for this example, the nucleus, they could mark plant and animal cell, where with the multiple choice grid, they couldn't mark both of them. So doing the checkbox grid allows them to, for nucleus, allows them to mark multiple answers for that particular topic, I guess you could say.
And then the last couple options we're going to go over is date and time. So you can actually have Google Form give the option of where the student or other teachers, depending on what you're using this for, they actually get to pick a calendar date or a time date. So under date, the very top is the teacher view and the bottom is the student view. So you would just say pick a day that works for you, and then you would say that this question type is date. The students would be able to actually pick a day on the calendar. And then the time, I've seen teachers use this for elementary school where they put a picture of a clock, a analog clock, so the circle one with the hands, the minute and the hour hand, and then the student actually has to put in what time that picture of the analog clock shows on them. But another way that this can be used is, let's say you're doing like coffee hours right now with your students in Zoom. Your students could pick a time and a day that works for them, as long as it's like within a range that you give them. So like you say, I'm available in the afternoon from 1 to 4. Let me know what time works for you. They could put, 2:45 kind of thing.
And then looking at our menu options when we are in our form. So you're going to see this when you're creating questions, this running vertical menu is going to just kind of stay with you as you're going down creating your questions. So the first one at the top, which is the circle with the plus in it, that is where you're going to add new questions. The one below that is where you can import a question from another form that you've already created. So if you are, if you want to basically reuse a question that you've created in the past, you can click that to import a question from a previous form. You can add a title or a description to your form within the form. You can add a picture. The next one is adding a video. And then the last one is adding sections. So you can kind of break up your form and you can break it up into different sections, and then questions appear on different pages. So maybe you are creating a quiz that is, let's just say 15 questions long, and you don't want just a running scrolling 15 questions all on one page and you want to kind of break it up into sections, you can do that. And you can add certain sections. You as the teacher, it's all going to just show up in one vertical kind of column line. But then as a student, they only see a section at a time. So they can answer the first couple questions, go to the next section, answer the next couple questions, go to the next section. So it's kind of like adding pages, if you think of it that way. So sometimes we, when we have our hard copy quizzes, maybe it's a 2-page quiz. And so there's 5 questions on one page, 5 questions on the other. That's kind of what sections kind of imitate.
And so adding titles and descriptions looks a little different on the form. So when you add a title and description, this is where the arrows are pointing to. This is just an example of what it would look like. So where it says paragraph question type is shown below, that is an example of what a title would look like from the student perspective. So it's essentially the same type, it's the same font. It might be a little darker, it kind of looks a little darker. And then the second arrow shows what the title with the description would look like. So where it says short answer question type is shown below, the student would be writing in one word as the answer, and I can have Google Forms automatically correct the one word answer. That is me putting in a title with a description. This is what it looks like for the student. So it's all the same color, and they really have to focus to see, okay, well, what are these titles and descriptions? How do they look? This changed the titles and descriptions didn't used to look like this. They actually had colors attached to them with the old form. And when the form was updated, for some reason, they took away those bolded colors that kind of pushed your attention to the titles and description. Not something I approve of, but it's just what it is, and we just have to make it work. But this is what it looks like from the student side. So just keep that in mind, that if you're putting titles and descriptions in there, the student's eyes aren't going to jump to it.
And then adding sections to your form. So when you add a section, it allows you, like we said, it allows you to kind of divide and break up your questions. So on our end, we're going to see, like, for example, this one is section 3 of 6. So this is what the student would see while they're in there. Normally in forms, okay, we're just going to scroll through your questions, but like we said, we can kind of break it up. So as the students go through and they've gotten to the bottom of a section, on this bottom one here, they're going to see like the next button. So they'll click next to go to the next section. They could also go back to go to a previous section that they have already worked on.
And then let's say you've given it to all of your students. Now you want to see the responses. Where is it? You're getting the emails, you're getting the notifications. Okay, my students took it. They're telling me they took it, but I can't find it. You go to Google Classroom and you can't see it. Because even if you're sharing your Google form through Google Classroom, the responses are still going to be in the actual form itself. So you would have to open up your Google form, and on the teacher view, you would see at the top that it says questions and responses. You're going to want to click where it says responses, and you're going to see a circle with the number of responses you have. So on this Google form, I had 187 responses. So then when you click on the responses, you'll see a summary, a question, and an individual section. And that's where you're going to be able to scroll and go through all of the responses of your students. So you'll be able to see insights. So it'll give you a graph. For every single question, it gives you a graph, which is really nice. Because especially if you're doing a common assessment for your PLC, you can just take this form into your PLC with you, and you can be like, okay, this is what I got. My average was this, my median was this was my range, this was my lowest score, this was my highest score, this is how many I had, this was a frequently missed question. So Google Forms will also show you if you had a frequently missed question, what that was and why. And it'll show you where the majority of your students answered that question. That way for the next day, that's that intervention tool. So it's guiding your instruction throughout without having to go through all of the tests yourself and tally up the questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is just like a little bigger view of what you would see. So the summary, question, individual. And then let's say that I wanted to just see overall, I would click on summary and it would show me everything. If I wanted to just see the specific questions that my students answered, I could click on question and it would just show me just the basic questions. But let's say I wanted to find a specific student's response. I could go to individual and I could search for one specific student and I could look at only their responses. And then if you notice right above individual, there's that little spot that says accepting responses. I can turn, right now it's on, but I could turn that off. That way it shuts down my form so no one else can submit a response anymore. Oh, there it is. And then let's say that, you know what, this is great, but I just need my data and I want to go through and highlight it. I don't want to look at it in a form. I want to look at it within a Google Sheet. On every single Google form under the responses tab, you're going to see a little green box. You'll want to click that green box and then Google Forms will give you an option to open up all of your responses within a Google Sheet. And then next to that green box, there's 3 vertical dots. And that just gives you some more options. If you wanted to reuse this quiz for next year, you could delete all the responses. You can print them. You could download them. You can unlink the form if you have it linked somewhere. You can get an email notification for new responses. So let's say that you did a Google form and a teacher emailed me about this yesterday. So she did a coffee time where her students are putting in times where they want to sign up and just have a one-on-one Zoom session with her. Well, she could turn on get email notifications for new responses. That way she gets emailed when one of her students fills it out. That way she doesn't have to keep checking and reminding herself to check it. She actually gets an email of when she needs to check the form.
And then we're going to talk about open responses in Google Sheets. So to see the responses in Google Sheets, like Satara said, you're going to click on that green icon and it's going to say view responses in Sheets. And then a box is going to come up and it's going to ask you, do you want to create a new sheet or do you want to select an existing sheet? So do you want the data and the responses that are in your form to go to a new spreadsheet? Or do you want those responses to go to a spreadsheet that you've already created? So if you're compiling data throughout the year and maybe you have a spreadsheet for math intervention and you want to just keep all those responses throughout the year in one sheet, then you can say select an existing sheet, find that sheet, take these responses, add it to that sheet. So it just kind of depends on how you're using the data, how you want to collect it, how do you want it to be organized. Okay, so we've kind of talked about data and like how we can use it in a more traditional sense. But what else can we do with Google Forms? How are some of the more, I guess you can say, unconventional ways that we can use Google Forms?
So one of the first ways that we wanted to talk about of different ways to use Google Forms is a guided form, also known as a choose your own adventure. So with a guided form, you can send a student to a specific section based on their answer. This allows you to make differentiated forms. You can embed intervention, you can embed scaffolding, and you can also use these as a type of student choice. So let's say for the end of the year, you have the students pick a project. You could create a Google form in order to guide them through creating a project. You could embed intervention. So if they're identifying parts of a cell, and based on the picture, they're supposed to say nucleus, but they choose mitochondria, they could go to a different section and learn about the mitochondria and then have to go back to the previous question to answer it again. How you would set this up is at the bottom of every single question, there are these 3 vertical dots. And when you click on those vertical dots, there's an option to go to a section based on an answer. And so that's how you would start setting up this type of choose your own adventure or a guided form.
And so looking at this, so this is an example of a question. So this is what we would see on the teacher end. So this is their question. It's saying identify the picture, and it gives them 4 choices. So if they chose mitochondria, it's going to take them to section 5, which is question 2. If they choose nucleus, it's going to go to section 2, which is a review of the nucleus. And then depending on what they choose, you can see it's going to take them to a different section of the form. So you're going to make sure that you want to label your sections so you know like where you want those. Depending on what they choose, you want to make sure that it's sending them to the right section. And then you would see those things. They are not going to see that. They're not going to see, oh, if I answer nucleus, I'm going to go to section 2. That's just for us on our end. But then depending on what they choose, they don't just go through the quiz. You can, like Satara said, you can embed intervention, you can embed review. So if they chose nucleus, now it's going to take them to the nucleus section, review that, and then when they're done, you can have that section bring them back to this section. They do the answer, they do the question again, they get it right, then they can continue on with your quiz.
So this page just shows you 2 different examples that you can click on. So if you were to click on one of these 2 pictures, it would actually take you to a guided form, 2 different ones that you could work through as a student, or you could look at it in the teacher perspective to see how it's all set up. That way, as you work through it, you'll see, like if you clicked on the cell one, just get some questions wrong and see what it does. Get some questions right, see what it does, and just see how it's guiding you through the form, what it's giving you, what it's telling you to do. Think about how you could improve it. Think about how you could make it work for you with even something else. So it could even be something just for grammar or math. Like, what is this answer? And you could do fractions, negatives. There's so much that you can do with the guided forms that's always embedding that intervention within it.
And then just to kind of, I'm going to go back to that real quick. So when you're setting this up for the first time, it can be a little overwhelming. It can be daunting. But if you need support, we're here to support you guys. And then the nice thing is that because this is digital, you make it one time, you have it forever. You don't have to keep recreating things. So you can slowly go through, start creating these guided forms and these guided kind of intervention tools. And then now you have them for the rest of your teaching career, and you can use them whenever you want. So another thing that you can do is you can password protect or response validation on a particular question. So students must answer the question correctly before moving on. So we're going to make it, required. But then we can password protect the quiz, the worksheet, or a video. So we're going to go to that more section, those three little dots, and we're going to choose response validation. And then we're going to go through and we're going to make sure that that question is, we're going to kind of like set a password, so they're going to have to know what that is before they turn it in, or before they continue on to the next question. And so you can have your answer. If they get it right, it lets them go on. If they get it wrong, then it kind of gives them, you can set up the response where it says like try again, and so they know, okay, I need to continue kind of working on this.
And then for setting up response validation, we just have a movie that's kind of showing you how to do it, whether you want to set it up with a number or a text. And there's great ways to do this and why. So one way could be just so that you don't overwhelm your students. Maybe they do one section of a project and then they come to you for a code word. That way they can go to the next section. So you're just giving it to them little by little. Another way could be that maybe you want them to get a specific answer correct. And so you don't want them to move on until you know that they understand that first concept. Otherwise, they're just going to have holes in their understanding when they progress. And then a really fun way is to make a digital escape room, which we're going to get into in a little bit. But a digital escape room, it's super fun. I did this with a 4th grade class at Kroll. And the students they were completing fractions. They were doing worksheets all about fractions. They were ordering fractions from the biggest to the smallest fraction. They were going through it. They were adding. They were subtracting. They were having so much fun. But because I called it an escape room, and because it was all about this guy's pizza parlor, they were okay with doing 7 different fraction worksheets to get an answer. So and they loved it, and they hated that the time ran out. And then what was nice is I didn't even create that. Someone else did from Breakout Edu, and I just utilized it. So there's so much stuff out there, and we're going to walk you through it in a little bit.
Okay, so we're going to talk about digital breakouts, or sometimes they're called escape rooms. So these forms use response validation to create like electronic treasure hunts, where students can use clues and codes to try to figure out how to break out or how to escape, those types of things. So a lot of teachers will use this, like Satara said, they'll use this to kind of review a concept or review a section of a story, something like that. And then it's a game for them. They think it's a game, and they're actually going through and they are practicing skills, and they're working on things. So you can set this up so they have to like unlock a form, and they have to unlock a certain thing to continue on, those types of things. So these are all, we have some hyperlinks here to different resources. The one on the bottom where it says digital sandbox resources, that is a website that teachers can submit breakouts that they've created. And so it gives you links to their forms, links to their website, and all you have to do is just use that link, and they've created it for you, and boom, now you can use it within your class. So it's a good way to kind of start, just to see what it's all about, and then you can go through and you can start creating your own. All right, so that is all that we have for you for Google Forms. Tomorrow we are going to be diving into Google Sheets. And so we're going to talk about different ways that we can use it besides just using it as like a data collection tool. So we're going to talk about, yes, you can organize, sort, graph data, but we can also do different things, some more engaging things with the students and whatnot. So I know a lot of people, when they hear Google Sheets, it's kind of like nails on a chalkboard to them. They don't think it's like a tool that they want to use. They think it's a little kind of out of their league, but you might want to check in tomorrow, because I think we have some things that you guys can definitely use in some ways that you guys will like it. So tomorrow, 10 a.m., we're going to be talking about Google Sheets. And yeah, so thank you guys for joining us today. And okay, so now we're going to go into the Q&A section of our PD. So I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, so let's pull up.
Really quick. So there are a few questions that popped up in the chat that I just want to address. So you can select in a form where if there's a new response that you get an email every time you get a response, that email will go to your turlockusd.org account. So we'll go to your Gmail account because that's what the Google form is associated with. You can, however, forward all of your Google Mail to your Outlook if you always check your Outlook. So that is an option. And we have an instructional sheet put together on how to do that. And what we can do is we can email that out, and I can send it to Marie and she can put it in the newsletter. That way everyone can get it. Another question is when you open up this Excel spreadsheet that's attached to your Google form, everything's organized. So it's organized based on your question. And so the student's email will be there, and then it'll have a list of the dates that they submitted it, like down to the millisecond, and then all of the questions and their specific answers all right there.
Okay, so let's go into our Q&A, and let's see. The first one, let's see. Okay. First one is, can you use a document camera with the Chromebook and Zoom? So I'm not sure if you can use a physical document camera. I know some things that teachers are doing is they are using their phones as kind of like a document camera. So what they'll do is they'll kind of set up a little rig and have their phone's camera like facing their desk, and then they join their Zoom call, and then they join from their phone as well, and then they have the camera going, so like their phone is like another person in the call, and then they are writing and working, but then everyone can see what's going on underneath the phone. So that's a way that some teachers are kind of using their phone as a document camera.
Yeah, because I don't know if the Chromebook will recognize it as a secondary camera source.
Yeah.
So that's something that you might have to play around with. I've never tried it, to be honest, to see if the Chromebook would recognize it. I know the Chromebook wouldn't recognize my iPad as a secondary source. So, but I don't know.
Okay. A teacher helped me change my documents from Word to Google Docs, and then shared each one as a link for parents for phase 3 work for students. I would like to save those in my Google Drive. When I open each, I notice that in the corner, there's a little triangle. Is that the way to do it? So when you are, let me see if I'm understanding this correctly. So when you're uploading Word docs into your Drive, and then you're converting them to a Google Doc, it should automatically save into your Drive for you. They should all be there already. So they should be there. So you should have both the Word and the Google Doc version in your Drive.
And if another teacher did it, then by clicking the triangle, you'll add it to your Drive, but you'll want to just make a copy of it just in case the other teacher deletes it. So when you click the triangle, it'll say add to my Drive, and then add it, and then go to File and make a copy. So make sure you go to File and make a copy, because even though you're adding it to your Drive, if your fellow teacher did it for you, he or she is technically the owner of that document, not you. It lives in both of your drives. But let's say Marshall uploaded something and he shared it with me. He's technically the owner, even though it's in my drive. If he deletes it, it deletes for me too. Yeah. So I can go to File and then make a copy. That way I know that I still have a copy of it.
Okay. Yeah. Now that you say that, I understand the question now. So yeah, do what she said. Is there a way to transfer multiple choice questions already written in Word to Forms without typing them over and over again in Forms? I'm trying to think if it will copy over. I'm trying to think if I've done that before.
I know the question will copy as long as you have the answers like A, B, C, D set up correctly. they'll be put in like option 1, 2, 3, 4, but the letter will also be there. So you'll still have to go back and backspace out A, backspace out B, backspace out C,
Yeah.
and backspace out D, but they do divide up. So copying and pasting would save you time. I did all of that a few years ago for all of my stuff. And then I was creating just Google Forms for everything. But my first one, of course, took longest, but then as I kept going, I got faster and faster with copying and pasting. So the copying and pasting is one of the things now that is really easy. I just go to the shortcut. So Control C copies, Control V paste. And if you mess up, Control Z is an undo. So Control C is copy, Control V paste, and Control Z is an undo button. So those are what helped me.
I'm gonna pull up a doc and a form right now, and we're going to try it and see what happens. I'm pretty sure it works, but let's just try it and see. Okay, so this is a doc that I just pulled up real quick. And like we talked about in the forms, how you can type in forms.new to create a new form. Same thing you can do with docs. So I just typed in docs.new and it created a blank document for me. So here's my question. Question 1, first answer, second answer, third answer. I'm going to highlight these and I'm going to do Control C to...
Yeah, that way won't work.
This way won't work?
Yeah, you're going to have to do the answer choices separate, I think. But I mean, try it. Let's try it all. Let's try it all.
Let me move this. Okay, so then let's go here. Oh yeah, so if I do... Yep, okay, so let's undo that. So I'm going to type in my question. So now let's go back here and let's just highlight our answer choices. And then I'm going to click here and I'm going to paste. So yeah. Oh, and it actually didn't take the
ABCD. The ABCD, yeah. And it might have just depended on how you formatted it too.
Yeah.
That's good. Was that from a Google Doc or a Word file?
That's from a Google Doc. Okay. So yes, you can copy and paste if you had it typed in Word or in Docs. You can copy and paste them. You just have to copy the question separately and then copy the answer choices separately. But at least you don't have to retype everything.
Next question is, can you paste documents or pictures in the question frame together with a written question? You cannot paste documents, but you can put in pictures. So if you already have like a big paragraph written on a Word doc and you don't want to have to recopy it or it all won't fit because of the word count, you can just take a little snippet or a little snapshot of it and input that image within there. So you can put in pictures of anything anywhere. So you can put in pictures in the question and pictures in the answer.
Yeah, so I know last year I was working with a grade level and they were wanting their students to like read a paragraph of text and then type in what the main idea of that paragraph was. So instead of them retyping the whole paragraph, we just took a screenshot of the text and then put that in as the image for the question. And then the students, the answer choice was like the paragraph response, and they just typed in what the main idea was.
And then another question, will this work if students are doing PowerPoint presentations and forms can be used to accept assignments that can then be shared in class? So 2 things. If students are turning in like a presentation, what I found was easiest, if they're turning it into me and then they're going to be clicking them and opening them and actually presenting in class, the easiest thing for me was to have them actually turn it in Google Classroom. That way I could go to Google Class. Well, I didn't go to Google Classroom. I sat in the back with my rubrics, but I showed them how to navigate Google Classroom. So then they would click on their presentation and they would open it up. But you could definitely have them turn it in a Google form. That way you could turn off accepting responses and you would still have all of their presentations in a folder in your Google Drive. So technically both ways would work.
Okay.
Oh, something just popped into my head with that. If you're going to have them turn in presentations through Google Form, there's on the file upload, you can change the size of a file that you accept, make it the maximum amount. Because if they start putting in animations and pictures and videos in their presentation, that file size is going to become huge. So make it the maximum amount that you can accept. I think like a terabyte is in there as a choice. So choose that one because that's the biggest one. So how it's organized is the smallest file size is at the top and the largest one is at the bottom. So just choose the bottom file size. That way you just give them as much room as possible. Sorry.
Let's see. Okay, so that one was questioned. Oh, jeez. That one was answered.
Can you show me how to do a snippet? Yes. So, I'm not on my Chromebook, but I can hold it up. So a snippet on your Chromebook. So anytime I do any copy pasting or making presentations, I always use my Chromebook. And the only reason why is because the snipping tool is my absolute favorite. So on my Chromebook, to do the snipping tool, I don't know if you can see this. This is just going to be a hot mess.
There you go.
So yeah. So there's Control Shift right here. So I push Control Shift and then I push this button right here, which is the Windows button. So I push Control Shift and then the Windows key. And then when I do that, my entire screen goes dark. And then I just drag my cursor around what I want. After that happens, in the bottom right-hand corner, it shows my little picture. And there's a few words that say copy to clipboard. I click it, and then I paste that picture wherever I want.
If you are on a Windows device, on the keyboard, if you do, okay, now I don't have a Windows device in front of me. If you do the Windows button, so like at the bottom, it has the little Windows icon. Mm-hmm. That plus Shift and S does the same thing on Windows.
Yes, it does.
And so that'll bring that up. If you're on a Mac and do Command Shift 4, it'll do the same thing. Your screen won't go dark, but your mouse cursor will turn into that plus, and then you can drag a specific section that you want to take a snippet of. On the Chromebook and on Windows, it's nice because it'll automatically add it to your clipboard, so it automatically like copies it for you, so then you can paste it into like a document or something. On a Mac, it's going to, depending on what version of Mac OS you're running, it's going to bring up a little window of that screenshot, and then there's some extra tools, so then you can kind of like put arrows, you can highlight things, and then you can save it as an image, and then you can insert that image into a document or to a forms or something like that.
What are the keys to push on a Mac?
Command Shift 4.
Command Shift 4. Okay, so I typed the snip on Windows, the Chromebook snip, and the Mac snip in the chat, just so that we have that visual.
Yeah. Okay.
And then after I score a form and return it back to my students, how can they go back and look at their form to learn from their mistakes? So that is a setting that you can set up within the setting. So it's kind of the only way that they get a copy of their response is right after they actually take it, unless they changed it. So in the settings, you can select a setting where the students receive a copy of their responses, and then after everyone has taken the form, you can go through and everyone can go over it. I wish there was a way that you could release them all at once. So after periods 1 through 7 took it, and they'd be like, okay, tomorrow we're going to go over it. Here's a copy of it. But as far as I know, and Marshall, correct me if I'm wrong, as far as I know, the only way for students to actually get a copy is if you like check a box in the settings for them to receive a copy.
Yeah, I'm looking through right now. I know it's a, so it would be under settings. I'm pretty sure this is it. So you would, in the settings, you're going to, underneath the general section, you're going to want to click see summary charts and text responses. So then they would see what they answered. They're going to get, they'll be able to see their responses. And then when you release the grades, they can kind of compare and say, okay, these are the ones that I got wrong. They can compare it to their questions.
And then if you've made it a quiz, under the settings, under making it a quiz, you'd want to check that the respondents meaning students, can see missed questions,
Yep.
see correct answers, and see point values.
Yep.
So you'd want all of that also.
And then like we talked about before, just make sure if you're at a secondary site that if you have all those marked, that you probably want to release the grades later on your own. You don't want it to be released immediately, because if I'm giving the same quiz periods 1, 2, 3, then my period 1 class will know if I take a quiz and it's 10 questions and I miss 2, but I have correct answer marked, now I know all the questions and I know all the answers. So then I could, in theory, share that.
Marshall, can you share slide 9?
Slide 9. I can do that.
And slide 9,
yep, here we go.
The third animation. So slide 9 is all about the settings, and we went over the general, presentation, and then quizzes. So if we just look at just the quiz settings themselves.
Oops.
No, you're good. Click again. And again.
Oh, here we go. There we go.
Yeah, there's 2 options under release grade. So you can do it immediately after each submission, so they see their grade. And when they get their grade, they can get an email list of everything, or later after manual review. So that means that after you look at all of them, then you can actually release their grades. So it kind of depends on what you want.
Yeah.
If you're elementary, I would say immediately after each submission.
Yep.
If you're going to have slightly separate questions for each class anyways, you can do it in the secondary sites. It kind of just depends what you've set your students up to expect. Like if you're going to have a bank of questions and they already know that everybody's going to get something different, you could let them see their quiz, but not let them see the correct answer or their missed questions. It just kind of depends. So it depends on your students.
Yep. Depends on how you have it set up. Depends. Yeah. A lot of variables. I mean, you can have missed questions and point value on, because they'll see, oh, I missed questions 2, 5, and 6, but they're not going to see, oh, for question 2, this is the right answer. They just know that the one that they chose was not the right answer, or whatever they typed in wasn't the right answer. And then if you're going to do later after manual review, underneath it says turn on email collection. So that would be under the general tab. You want to make sure that you click that first one where it says collect email addresses. So then you can send it.
Send it out.
Sorry, I don't know why I blanked on that. I'm like, so you can do something with it. Okay.
And let's see, I know there were some questions that were put in the chat, but I don't know if we got it all.
Okay, so if I click later and the bottom 3, they won't be able to share the correct answers with other periods until I release the scores correct. Because they won't see, they'll turn it in. They won't know how they did. They won't know the right answers, the wrong answers. And then when you release it, they get all that information. So they get what they got right, what they got wrong, everything.
And then someone put that this is a lot of stuff to digest, and it is.
It is.
This is so much. All of these webinars and these virtual PDs, it's a lot of stuff. And so definitely just go slow. Pick one thing and just try that. Try that, and only that one thing until you get it, until you know it like the back of your hand, or even better, and then try one more thing. So just go very, very slow. Don't try to overwhelm yourself. If you're going to show up tomorrow for the Google Sheets, we tried to make it as short as possible as well, just because that's overwhelming. Google Forms is overwhelming. Google Slides it's a lot of Google. It's a lot of buttons, a lot of choices. Everything works different. So definitely just go slow.
Yeah. I mean, when, like just to kind of reiterate what Satara is saying, like something that's been a constant through all of these PDs is baby steps. Don't overwhelm yourself. We got enough going on. Just in the world in general. Like you don't need to add more stress to yourself. So if you've never used forms before, don't try to jump in and create a choose your own adventure. Like just start using it to collect data, do simple quizzes, do things like that until you can kind of get comfortable with it. And then when you're comfortable with that, then move on to the next thing. So when we're showing you all these things, we just want to show you what it can do. We're not expecting, oh, now everybody's going to start creating all these things. No, like we know everyone's in different places. So do what's comfortable for you. And then when you're ready to move on to that next step, if you're not comfortable doing it on your own, that's what we're here for. We're here to help you, guide you through it. And then another question was, so when we click later to release it later and they get everything, are they going to see the original questions? Yes, they'll see the original questions. So they'll get an email response and it's going to have everything kind of broken down, and it'll say question 1, here's the question, here's your response. You got it right, you got it wrong. If you got it right, awesome. If you got it wrong, here's the correct answer. So they'll get it in a kind of email summary.
Another thing I want to point out with Google Forms is like you can put in the correct answers. And that is one thing we didn't go over is when you make it a quiz, you have to select the correct answers. Let's say, because I've done this, the correct answer is A, but you told the form the correct answer was B. And you catch that later. That's okay. Because you can go in there and you can change it from B to A and it'll automatically rescore all 187 students' papers. And then tomorrow you'll just have to deal with all 187 of them complaining. But it will rescore it for you. Also, when your students point out a typo, you can change it on the spot and then it'll change it live for everybody. So it is a live running form, meaning that any changes you make automatically show up on the spot. And I'm known for making spelling errors or because I go through things really fast and my student will be like, you missed a comma here. I'm like, okay, I'll go put a comma. So I'll go in, I'll put a comma, and it'll update for everybody else.
Yeah,
You did that Monday. Yes. Yeah.
They love to point out the errors that we make, which is fine.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, I'm human. I'm like, that's why I would tell my students, be like, that's why I have you here.
Yes.
Keep me in check. And then they would laugh.
Or I would tell them, oh, I put it there on purpose to see if anybody was paying attention. And then eventually they're like, yeah, right. You know, it works on like the first week of school, but then when it's like the third month and I keep making mistakes, then they kind of catch on. And they're like, yeah, no, that's just you making mistakes.
I had a student tell me, I thought you were a professional. And I'm like, stab me right in the heart.
You're like, okay, thanks.
And then she just looks at me and smiles. I'm like, today's a good day, isn't it? But that's, 8th graders.
Yeah.
They're sweet.
They are.
Their own kind of love.
So thank you guys for joining us today. If you have any other questions, please shoot us an email. We're here to help. We're here to support you guys. Have a great Wednesday, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.